Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about EKGs in our heart and how they are affected by something known as hypoxia. So to begin with, let's talk a little bit about hypoxia. So hypoxia is when there is, as we can see here, we have the bottom part of our heart. Here's the left superior ventricle, and here is the blood cells flowing here. So hypoxia occurs when there's a lack of blood or of oxygen in the blood. And so when the blood comes here and is delivered, something could be happening up here, like there could be like a little bit of an restriction here in the veins and arteries, causing the blood here to be flowing not as much. And so that causes a lack of oxygen here. And that lack of oxygen, what occurs is it stops the mitochondria in our cells from making ATP. And this ATP can affect our cells in multiple different ways, including restricting the use of two different pumps that require a lot of it, mainly the sodium potassium pump and also the IK ATP channels. And these channels in our, if we were to have our cell, here we'd have the sodium potassium pump. So it brings sodium in and potassium
bring the
out.
sodium out.
Yeah.
Takes sodium out.
Takes sodium out and brings potassium in to regulate the RMP. And also here we have the IK ATP channel. And this one allows the potassium to go out. That way we're able to regulate our RMP. But these both require ATP. So when we don't have ATP to supply them, they can't be used, meaning potassium can't be pumped back in, but it also can't leave the cell, which leads to an increase in our RMP. And as you can see here, we have an elevation in our standard procedure or our standard EKG. This happens in the endocardium typically, but it can also become transmural when we have it occur all the way from the endocardium to the epicardium. And this is known as transmural, since it takes up the whole area here, both walls.
So when we increase the RMP in the cell, and then what happened to that?
This area here?
Yes.
So when we increase the RMP here, something that happens here is this part right here is tends to be negative.
Why it tends to be negative?
Tends to be negative because it's because of the RMP that we're missing here in this area. The inside of the cell tends to stay positive, while the outside tends to be negative, since we're not able to have potassium outside to repolarize the cell.
So EKG read the positive inside of cell or outside of the negative one?
Yeah, it reads that it's positive inside and negative outside.
So EKG read which one, inside or outside?
EKG reads the outside.
Yes, yes.
And so when we see the outside here, this constantly points on a negative tail towards the positive head here, which is what creates this increase here in our elevation. And
increase the which one?
Of the baseline. Well, here, as you can see, we actually have a decrease. So why does this occur here, and why is it not the same as when we just have it on one side? Well, this is because here we have this negative on all of these cells, and instead of pointing it straight towards the positive lead, because it takes over both sides, it actually tends to go to send this negative tail towards this negative side more than here, which means we're going lower, since negative towards a negative creates a downward shift in our EKG. And as you can see here, it looks a little different from this. This is our typical EKG reading. It has a couple different parts. So we have here a P wave, a Q wave, R, S, and T waves. And through these we have a section known as the ST segment. We have QT interval. We have the P R segment. Here we have the PR interval. And here we have the QRS complex. And so through these, we're going to be affecting the ST part a lot. As you can see here, we have the ST underlined because that's what it stands for in these names. So this is a non-ST elevation myocardial infraction or
Infarction?
myocardial infraction, right?
Infarction?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, this is the ST elevation mitochondrial infraction. So, well, what it means is that here, the ST waves are the parts that are most affected. As you can see, when we start elevating here, start with our elevated baseline here, our P, our Q, and our R waves look pretty normal here. This is P, Q, R, and they look pretty typical because they're not really affected. But the S and T waves look very different. Our S wave dips all the way down towards the baseline because this part of the wave is the only part that the heart sees as normal.
EKG read.
Or that the EKG reads as normal.
Why?
Why? Because when it's depolarizing here, this side, it tends to stay the same. Where here it's going this way.
What is the end of the S wave?
The end of the S wave is
What happened to the ventricle?
the ventricle is completely polarized or depolarized.
Yes.
So once it's fully depolarized, it's normal, and so
EKG read as
normal.
yes.
And so that's why it comes down. While our T wave here, it starts from here and heads up just like normal. And so that's why it looks pretty typical. While here on the ST wave, or on the normal STEMI, our ST waves here, the S and the T don't tend to make it all the way down, while our P or Q and our R are pretty normal. This is known as ST elevation. Well, this is ST depression here. Since the S here is depressed a lot, or is lowered a lot, well here it's elevated from your typical because when it comes here to read this, this is depolarized much quicker than normal. And even though it becomes fully depolarized completely, it stays elevated. And
Why?
because we already have this aiming towards here, and since most of it is already depolarized, you're not going to be able to go.
No, S wave is the completion of a depolarization that EKG read as normal. So the S wave will try to keep the normal baseline.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Since it's since it's more normal, it's going to try to stay as close to the base as possible, and that's why it won't lower itself.
Yes. So if the normal baseline is normal EKG, P, Q, R, S, T. You see, they try to keep the normal only in S line. The rest of them this is a normal EKG, but once they make a depression, they have to go abnormal wave. But once they hit the S line, it's only the time moments that EKG read as normal. So it makes a normal baseline. Both the black and red one try to make the normal baseline.
And so that's why it stays elevated. Our T is still kind of elevated, but not as much compared to the effect that happens on the S.
So they are very close because EKG read only this spot as normal.
Yes.
So they try to go up to the normal baseline. Yes. And this one also, if EKG reads normally, this S wave probably go P, Q, R, S, S and T, and those lines will be match each other.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So what is the transmural?
Transmural, as I said earlier, is this part right here.
Yes.
When you have STEMI, you have the hypoxia occur all the way from the endocardium
Yes.
to the epicardium, and since it's traversing
Mhm.
from one side of the wall to the other,
Mhm.
it is known as transmural or cross wall.